Before the age of 30, he had ruled most of the known world. How did a teenager build an empire that still inspires leaders today? This is the story of Alexander. He was born in Pella in 356 BC, son of King Philip II of Macedon and Queen Olympias, a priestess who believed her son was divine. From birth, he was raised not like a prince, but like a myth. At age 13, he met the man who would shape his mind. Aristotle, philosopher, scientist, master of logic. Under him, Alexander learned not just how to conquer, but why. He studied Homer as scripture, Achilles as his model. By 16, he was leading armies. At 20, after his father was assassinated, he became king. Not by ceremony, but by blood and necessity. His enemies saw a boy, he showed them a storm. He crushed rebellions in Thebes, razed the city to ash, and declared, "This is what happens to traitors." But it wasn't Greece he wanted, it was Persia, the empire that had once humiliated Greece. He didn't want revenge, he wanted a legacy. In 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont with 40,000 men, not to survive, to be remembered. At the Battle of Granicus, he led the charge himself. Spear in hand, armor shining, he should have died. Instead, he won. Then came Asus. Darius III, the Persian king, outnumbered him 2-1, but Alexander didn't just break their lines, he shattered their spirit. Darius fled, his army broke. Alexander found his chariot empty, but inside it lay Darius's wife, mother, and children. Alexander bowed, protected them. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a king who understood image. Cities fell like dominoes: Phoenicia, Syria, Egypt. Each conquest was not just a victory of arms, but a reshaping of the world. In Egypt, beneath the relentless sun, he stood on the golden shoreline and envisioned something that would outlast his armies. There, he founded Alexandria, a city destined to echo his name for millennia. But his true test came at Gaugamela. The battlefield stretched wide under a haze of heat, a plain where tens of thousands would clash. Dust swirled so thick it blotted out the sky, turning day into a choking twilight. The roar of war was deafening: drums, hooves, the clash of steel. Darius stood with an army vast enough to swallow the horizon, and yet, when the tide broke, it was not Alexander who faltered. Again, Darius fled. Again, Alexander stood. Not merely victorious, but unshaken, a figure carved into legend beneath a storm of dust and blood. He entered Babylon not as a destroyer, but as a liberator. The streets, once braced for fire and ruin, instead filled with music and the scent of burning incense. Merchants draped garlands over his path, and children reached out to touch the cloak of the foreign king, who came not to take, but to share. He began dressing in Persian robes, silks dyed in colors the Greeks had never dreamed of, stitched with patterns that told the stories of empires past. He studied their gods, walking barefoot into temples, carved from stone older than his homeland, listening to the priests speak of creation and destiny. In a move that startled both friends and foes, he married a Persian princess, uniting two worlds not just by sword, but by blood. It was more than politics, it was a vision, a sign that the boy who had set out to conquer was now determined to weave East and West into a single, enduring tapestry. Some called him a traitor to Greece, others called him visionary, but not all admired him. His closest general, Cletus, who had once saved his life, argued with him. In a drunken rage, Alexander killed him. He wept for days, because even gods bleed. He marched farther, through deserts into India, against war elephants. He won again, but the cost was visible now. His men were no longer the eager youth who had followed him across the Hellespont. They were scarred, sunburned, and broken. The monsoon slashed them, the jungles wore them down. They had conquered the known world, yet felt like exiles in a dream they did not choose. They begged, not as soldiers, but as brothers, to go home. Alexander listened, for once, not because he agreed, but because he understood an empire cannot stand on the backs of broken men. In Babylon, he planned new campaigns. Arabia, the world. He pored over maps, dreaming of oceans his men had never seen and cities whose names they could barely pronounce. He spoke of building roads to the edges of the known earth, of blending cultures, gods, and kingdoms into one. But then he fell ill. Some say poison, others disease. But perhaps it was simply the body breaking under the weight of ambition. A fever took him. Day by day, he withered. His commanders, terrified, crowded his chamber. They asked him who would rule after, a question that could decide the fate of continents. He whispered, to the strongest. He died at 32, but left behind an empire stretching from Greece to India. No blueprint, no equal. He became more than a king, he became a question. What does it mean to live beyond your years? To write your name, not in ink but in continents? In a world where youth scrolls for purpose, Alexander carved it into the earth. Not because he had more time, but because he refused to wait. Even after death, his generals carved up the empire like scavengers at a feast. They fought for pieces of his legacy, but none could match the shadow he cast. His body vanished from Babylon, but his myth multiplied. To this day, cities still bear his name. Statues still capture his gaze. And leaders, from Napoleon to Caesar, invoked him as legend incarnate. He changed more than borders. He changed what was possible. He united East and West, blade and book, strategy and soul. So the next time someone says you're too young to change the world, remember the boy from Macedon who became a storm, who died a god. Subscribe. More untold legends await.